You start putting your podcast on YouTube, you release episode after episode, and nothing really happens. The numbers are stuck, the algorithm never really pushes it. And the only people who seem to watch are the people already in your network, friends, colleagues, and maybe a few loyal listeners. So naturally, you start looking at everything else. Maybe I need a better camera. Maybe I need an intro with subtitles, like all the big podcasts. Maybe I need a studio background with LED lights. But most of the time, none of that stuff is the problem. The real reason podcasts fail on YouTube is a lot simpler, and it usually happens in the first 30 seconds of an episode. I see this mistake in almost every podcast that starts uploading to YouTube. Most episodes start like this: welcome back to the podcast. Today, I want to talk about something I've been thinking about. Or even worse, something like welcome to the podcast, where we speak to CEOs who've scaled their business fast. You know, those ones that are pre-recorded and voiced by somebody who isn't even the host. And I think the moment that happens, the viewer disconnects, not because the topic is bad, but because the story started in the wrong place. So now let me be clear. I know you've achieved great things as a host, and I know you have a good story, and I know you can help people. But the problem is you're telling the story before the viewer understands why it matters to them. So your podcast episode is never really the story. The listener is. And when somebody finds your video on YouTube, they don't know you yet. They click because something in the title or the thumbnail look like it might be relevant to them. So in the first few seconds, they're asking one question: does this understand my problem? And if the video starts talking about you instead of them, most people leave. And then YouTube sees that immediately. So if you look at a graph, you will see that a huge amount will drop off in the opening 30 seconds. And that's the reason why. If you're ignoring this, something frustrating starts happening then. You keep improving the production, so better camera, better lighting, better studio, but the audience never actually grows. You're essentially building a nicer and nicer studio to talk to the same 25 people. And that's when people start thinking podcasting just doesn't work for them. The frustrating part is this: most podcasters think this is a production problem, and it's almost always a storytelling problem. And once you see that solution, everything becomes much simpler. So here's 3 simple rules that make a huge difference. First, don't start with a scripted intro. Things like welcome to the podcast where we speak to founders, or welcome back to another episode, or hey guys, and introducing yourself. They feel professional and they feel like something you should do, but they slow down a video on YouTube immediately. Co-viewers never need an introduction to you. They need a reason to stay, and they need it super fast. Secondly, if you're using teaser clips, which a lot of people do from interviews at the start, they must validate the click. This is where a lot of podcasts go wrong. They cut together random, interesting moments from a conversation, but those clips don't connect directly to the title and thumbnail. So what you got to do is decide on the title first and the thumbnail, and then choose clips that make the viewer feel like they've clicked the right video. Third, never ask for a favor before you've given value. You often see this on podcasts that are on YouTube. So before we start, make sure to like and subscribe. Or they start pushing their website or their business, but the viewer hasn't received anything yet. And that is really just an invitation for them to click right back off. Give the value first. And once the viewer feels like they've learned something, those things happen naturally anyway. Now, while this is technically YouTube advice, working on this will actually make you a much better podcaster. Because once you start thinking about the listener first, everything changes. You start asking better questions like, where is this person right now? What are they struggling with? What are they telling themselves in their own head? And often the reason you can understand those things so well is because you've been there yourself. And that's your biggest leverage as a podcaster, understanding the listener journey. If you know exactly where they are mentally, what they're worried about, what they're trying to figure out, you can build an episode around that experience, and suddenly your podcast feels far more relevant. Before recording any podcast episode, ask yourself 2 questions. Who is this for, and what problem does it solve? If those 2 things are clear in the first few seconds, everything changes because retention improves and YouTube can understand exactly who the video is for and put it in front of the right people, and your podcast finally starts to get pushed. Podcasting feels personal, so it's natural to start with your story. But the paradox is this: the moment you make the listener the center of the story, that's when your podcast actually starts to grow.